All right. Good evening, Barnegat. Our live is spooling up. Starting to see people jumping on. About 30 seconds and we'll get rolling. Hey, Stephanie. Good to see you. I owe you a phone call. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. We got plenty of people jumping in here. Start off with the COVID stats like we've been doing every week. We're up to 241 cases in town. We had 3 new cases today, 2 new cases yesterday. So when we talk about where our averages have been over the past couple weeks, we had really slowed down to just really just a trickle, right? We were averaging a case a day over the period of about 3 weeks. Now this past week, we've started to bump up a bit in what we're seeing daily positives. We averaged 2.5 a day over the past week. Had a couple of 3s and 4s in there. It's not really surprising. We're testing a lot more. We know a lot more testing centers have opened up. They've allowed pharmacists to authorize testing as opposed to having to get a script from the doctor. We're testing asymptomatic people now, so it kind of lends itself to reason that we'd see an uptick in positives the more we test. So not necessarily any sign that things are headed in the wrong direction. Just a sign that we're doing some more testing. So no real issues there. Looking at our call for service, we had talked about things really starting to pick up this month of May, and kind of not really valid to do a comparison anymore between April and May because April was just really slow, especially the first part of the month. So again, what we do here, beyond tracking that, we look every 24 hours to see, what's happened in recent history, what kind of trends we have. But we take a look at this month of 20 versus the same time period, the same month in 19. So if we look at May from the 1st up through the 27th, so we have full days data in there for this year versus last year, we see that our domestic violence calls, while they're down from the big numbers we saw over the past probably 8 weeks, they're still up versus last May, up about 22%. Our first aid calls are down about 26%. Our motor vehicle crashes down 42%. That's a pretty big number, right? So 42% less crashes in May of this year so far versus this same period of May last year. Again, just common sense. Less people driving their kids to school, less people driving to work because we got a lot of people working from home. So clearly less cars on the road equals less accidents. What we've seen on a statewide level from a higher altitude, even though we have less cars on the road, we've seen the fatalities have been up, traffic fatalities. We haven't seen that here, right? We don't have the high speeds really in town other than out on 72. So we haven't seen any uptick there. We're just significantly down in our regular everyday crashes across the board, which is not a bad thing. And when we look at overall calls for service, we're within 1% of where we were last May. So officers have answered about 900 calls so far this month. So we're hopping like we always are this time of year, and officers continue to do a great job with that. So I'll double into a couple things to handle today because I'm sure there's questions about it. We had a propane truck doing a delivery out in Pinewood Estates that had a malfunction with the delivery system, with the valves and the hose. So we ended up with a propane leak out there. Officers had to evacuate about 30 homes. Nobody was injured. We had a good quick response from our volunteer fire company. Station 11 did a great job out there, helping out secure the scene, helping us get people to safety. And our local hazmat response team, which comes out of Berkeley Township, responded, and they got the leak issue resolved, got everything squared away, and got everybody back in their homes. It was all probably buttoned up in less than an hour. So great job by everybody, especially the volunteers on that one. And then not too long ago, if you heard more of the siren fanfare going on in town, there was a structure fire on Barnegat Boulevard. Again, our volunteers out of Station 11, great job getting there quickly. Officers getting on scene quickly, getting the people out of the house, evacuating the neighbors as a precaution, and Station 11 did a great job knocking that fire down quickly. So no injuries, and again, we just see consistent good performance and cooperation between the police department and our local volunteers. They put in a lot of effort in training and coordinating, and this is when you see that pay dividends when we have these kind of incidents happen. So our shifts today have definitely been hopping here with a lot of calls. So talking about the officers, we hit on every week where we're at with our staffing and the officer quarantines. We only have one officer who's out on quarantine right now, and again, that's like we've had over the past probably month. Anybody who's been out hasn't been because we have officers who've tested positive. It's typically they have a family member who's in the house who tested positive, and we keep them out as a precaution here, so that obviously we're not risking any attrition with our workforce here. So the other officers who've been out are all back to work. Nobody developed any symptoms, and still, knock on wood, we've made it this far through. We haven't had any officers here who've tested positive for this. So they continue to do an outstanding job day in and day out. The officers here with all this extra decontamination and all the PPE. As the temps come up, obviously wearing the thicker the masks, the N95s, the respirators, having to wear the goggles that are fogging up on them. It's not a pleasant working environment sometimes, and they're doing a great job with it. Doing a great job handling calls and managing all that at the same time, and keeping each other safe. So, we talk about the little benefits of doing that. You've heard me mention since it started how we've had some departments that really have been hit hard by this, losing upwards of 20-30% of their officers to quarantines or positive results. The team here has done so well with this that we're typically, we track overtime expenditures, obviously, right? We definitely can go through some money in overtime in a department as busy as we are, and we look at where we typically would be this time of year, and we see we've expended less than half of the overtime that we normally would through May of this year. So that's great, especially when we know that, or at least we anticipate budgets getting tight over the next year to 18 months. It's good for us to see that we're operating well underneath where the budget is. So again, everything's interconnected here. So that great job that the officers do, keeping everything sanitized, wearing their PPE, being disciplined about that, pays dividends down the road, because it gives us, again, the financial bandwidth to do what we need to do here without overrunning our budget. So that's just another great benefit of the great job they're doing. A couple of calls I want to talk about. I want to talk about the fireworks calls, because I know that it's been a hot button issue on Facebook and around town. We'll put out, we talked about this recently, we're going to put out some guidance just to kind of remind everybody what's legal in New Jersey and what's not legal as far as fireworks go. As a general rule, if it's something that launches up in the air and goes bang, it's not legal in New Jersey. So I think we have a little information gap out there that a lot of people just think all fireworks are legal. We can just go ahead and light them off. And I know we have this, I guess really around here, it's been running over the border into Pennsylvania to stock up and bring the stuff back and light it off. I'll tell you this: we respond to all the calls that we get. The fireworks that we dealt with over the past week were legal. But that being said, if we come across people lighting off stuff that they're not allowed to be lighting off, we will absolutely be issuing summonses on that. So I can run down a laundry list of reasons we don't want people using illegal fireworks. Not the least of which is injuring themselves and blowing their hands off. And, we can go right down the line to, dropping them into gutters full of leaves and all kinds of other issues that pop up with it. So, again, we see the complaints that are out there. Feel free to keep calling and reporting it, and we'll continue to, track down the people that are launching them, and we'll either verify that, they're legal, or if they're not, we'll take the action we have to take to square that away. A lot of talk about an incident over this past weekend over at the village courts, locally known as Four Courts. A group of individuals reported some kind of a disturbance, hearing loud bangs. Some people said they thought it was fireworks. Some people said they thought it was gunshots. And then, anybody who lives over there saw our officers out there over the next couple of days. Anytime we get a report that there's an allegation that there was some kind of a gunshot involved. Obviously, we're gonna go the extra mile looking into that and investigating it. We went as far as to have Sheriff's Department, CSI come down and check that whole area for evidence, and that's a case that we continue to investigate until we're comfortable that either there was not any kind of a crime committed there, so that we can relay that to the community, or if we determine there was something there, so that we can pursue that. So more on that to come. We'll let you know if anything comes out of it. But we had no reports of anybody getting shot. We didn't, find any, any bullet holes anywhere or anything like that. So that's where that incident's at. Talking about how we've been spooling up since really the beginning of May, back to full staffing on the road, and making sure that we keep a lid on any incidents that go on in town. We talk about consistently have been talking about how Barnegat has had the lowest crime rate in Ocean County when we look at the last full year of UCR that's out there, and we don't want to lose a handle on that because we're in the middle of COVID. So highlighting not just the great work the officers on the road are doing, but if we look at crime reduction unit, we look at what crew's been doing, over the past just about a little over a week. They've got more than a dozen arrests for everything from cocaine, heroin, marijuana distribution. So we don't want anybody to get the false sense that, we've in any way throttled back here because of COVID. It is as far as enforcing the laws go, and especially looking at those issues like drug dealing and drug use, we're going to be as active pursuing that as we've ever been, because again, that's how we keep the crime rate low here and make sure it's a good community to live in, and we're going to continue that. So great work by crew over the last week, keeping on top of that. We look at the executive orders, backing off to the higher altitude a little bit at the state level. Really only one executive order since we spoke last week. That's 148, which expanded the outdoor gatherings to 25 people. We continue to have no compliance issues here locally. Our businesses, again, have been great working within these restrictive framework that they're stuck working within. And again, we hope that gets dealt with sooner than later, as far as some of the things I'm sure you've been hearing the rumors about outdoor dining, and we'll talk about the graduation thing here in a second. We get questions constantly about hey, are we going to be able to open up this business? Are we going to be able to go back to outdoor dining? I'll tell you, the reality of it is, like is often the case when this stuff happens, the communication is not the greatest. So I'll give you the example of graduation. The state decided that we go back July 6th to in-person graduations would be allowed. I sat on the same state conference call I sit on every morning at 9:15. You've got upwards of 600-700 executive law enforcement executives, command staff that are on there. Went through the whole call, not a word about that we were going to be able to have in-person graduation. And I probably 15 minutes after that get a text from my daughter telling me that, hey, there in-person graduation is allowed July 6th. How do you know that? I was just on a state call, didn't say a word about it. Oh, the governor's Twitter account just tweeted it out. Oh, okay, great. So, the information flow when people are calling us, asking us questions, thinking that we have some kind of inside baseball as to what's going to be allowed when. It's just not the case. A lot of times I'm finding out through social media, just like you are, what the latest restriction is that's lifted. So clearly makes it a challenge for us to continue to try to coordinate with our local businesses and the school district over what we can do and what's allowable and what's not allowable. So we're just going to continue to do the best we can with that. I've been talking to Dr. Latwis about graduation and trying to determine, again, trying to predict what's going to be allowed by the state in another month and a half, using graduation as the example. We're going to be allowed to have in-person graduation, but we have to restrict it to whatever the allowable gathering limit is for outdoors. Well, that's presently 25 people. So, I'm glad I'm not in Dr. Latwis' shoes, because at that point I have to decide, all right, well, how do I plan a graduation if I don't know if I can have 25 people there, 125 people there, 250 people there? Nobody knows what that number is going to be, or at least if they do know, they're not telling us. So again, just when it's when it comes down to some of these questions, just asking that you have patience with us and understand that as soon as we get the info, we're trying to push it out to you, but sometimes that info is not hasn't been terribly forthcoming to us. So that's where we're at there. But again, when we look at the bathing beach, the dock, the parks, all the assets we have in town that people are out enjoying, we have had very few issues, no real compliance issues, and no problems, which again is a great testament to the community here. And I'm going to cap it off with the last things. I know I saw it pop up on Facebook this morning, but everybody who's on watching, and usually we have a couple hundred people here while we're doing this, and we usually have about 4,000 views on these. 48 hours into it being out there. You as the Barnegat community know what the facts are about this town, and this term Barnegetto keeps driving me that I want to jump out a window here. I'll give you the fact again now, so you can go out there and be stewards of this information and put it out there. I say it a lot for a reason. Barnegat had in 2018, which is the last full year of UCR, and it continues to be that low, the lowest crime rate in Ocean County, period. So, wherever that moniker came from years ago, and I've been here since before I could walk. So, 47 years almost I've spent either living or working in this town. I know that was an old term, but I can tell you that the town, even in 1994 that I started working in as a cop, this is a shadow crime-wise of what we had back then. So understand when you're looking at towns around us, and I won't necessarily call them out with their numbers, but there's towns around us that have crime rates that are 50, 60, 70% higher than the crime rates are in this town. So when you see that, feel free to put that information out there. Safest town in Ocean County, lowest crime rate in Ocean County, and the men and women of the agency, I'm sure, plan on keeping it that way. And if they keep doing the job they've been doing, we'll stay there. So that is all I have by way of an update this week. I'm going to start trying to roll through the comments, and we'll jump on with any questions we can. Hello to everybody and hi to everybody. Yeah, listen, I'll go the mask thing again. I see Vanessa, we're posting mask stuff on here. Listen, at the end of the day, I'll post the studies for you if you like. The last two studies that were done clearly show masks reduce the chance of transmission. People who know me and have been through this one before are going to laugh a little bit, and I'll take a quick sidebar. Masks don't have to be 100% solution. All right. There's a great theory out there that deals with risk mitigation. Go ahead and Google it. It's called the Swiss cheese theory. Dr. James Reason, and it talks about how you can think of each little step we take to prevent a bad thing from happening like a layer of Swiss cheese, right? It's a layer of protection, but it's got some holes in it. And each layer that we can add in, we increase the chance that those holes aren't going to line up, so that we're not going to have an accident. We're not going to have the bad thing happen. So if masks even reduce the risk of transmission by 30%, 40%, again, the latest study that was done showed that it reduced it by 75%. But even if it was a lower percentage than that, I will take the 50% reduced transmission rate over doing nothing. So again, there's no law that says you have to wear a mask. There is no there's no penalty for not wearing it. But the recommendation is out there from the CDC for a reason, and that's because it helps to reduce transmission. So the masks aren't going to go away. I can promise you that. As we get back to opening up more, and we're opening up more businesses and getting people back to work, you're going to see a central theme, and that's going to be that it's going to be masks either required or strongly recommended. So that's where that's going to be, and I don't see it changing. Yeah, I see the shout outs for Station 11. They really did a great job today, especially on that structure fire. Got there quickly, knocked it down quickly. So we didn't have damage to neighboring homes, nobody injured. You can't ask for a better job than that. Yep, I see the comment, Christine, on taking care of that turning lane on Route 9. That was something that the township committee, I know, put out to the state. I feel like it was probably almost 2 years ago that they started beating the drum on that, and that finally got done. So, and good question. I like this group because we don't get softball questions. I'd like to know what's done to ensure that there isn't racism in our police department. So there's a couple things we do here to stay on top of making sure that we don't have any bias-based policing in the police department. One, we talk about the MVRs, the in-car cameras in the police cars, and body-worn cameras. Virtually everything our officers do from the time they get to work until the time they leave is recorded, documented, and it gets reviewed by supervisors. So our patrol sergeants, who have just a long laundry list of things that they're responsible for, one of those primary things they're responsible for is randomly reviewing these videos every week of their squad to make sure that we're doing it right. Being a CALIA accredited agency means that we have to have policies in place and that we have to do data analytics basically on our arrests, on our summonses, to identify if we have issues where we are arresting, issuing summonses to a protected class that's not in proportion to our interaction with them. So there's a lot we look at to stay on top of that here, and we also do a lot of training. And it's if we look at the issues going on out in Minneapolis right now, I think that's a good example of where we have to, as a law enforcement profession, be able to look at incidents like that, call it out right away as unacceptable, and that we need to hold those officers accountable, and talk about the things that we're doing to make sure that we don't have that type of incident here, that type of policing here. I think most times when you look at it, it's poor hiring practices, it's a lack of training, it's a lack of policy, and it's a lack of accountability. And those are all things that we don't have a problem with here, and that we spend a lot of time and energy making sure that we're on top of. So again, our policies are all out there. They probably get Oprah'd a couple of times a year. If you jump on Oprah machine, I'm sure you can find the latest round of our policies out there. We don't hide anything, and I'm happy to talk about the steps that we take there. So that's a great question. Farmers market starts in June, coming up, Jen. All right, Ellen, good question on mask compliance. We've seen really good mask compliance where it's required. We talk about people that have to wear them into those essential businesses. Haven't had any issues there. And we're seeing probably, I would say, in the neighborhood of 50-60% out in the open spaces. So again, haven't seen any problems, haven't really had any issues, and I expect it'll continue that way. Yeah, I know. I keep seeing I just have graduation Lowe's. There's 9,000 people in there. I get it. You know, one of the frustrations for law enforcement agencies, I don't want to speak for other agencies, but I can tell you, at least for us, you know, we put so much effort into building the relationships with the community that we have, and then you know, our boots on the ground, the officers that are out there, are essentially the ones that have to enforce these executive orders, regardless of what their feelings are about them personally. That's their job to go out there and do that. And it's frustrating when we have to go out and do that, and explain to somebody, got a mom and pop business in town that is considered non-essential, isn't allowed to have 8 people in it, but we can have 3,000 people on the beach. I get that. I don't have an answer or an explanation for you. I just know that I've been saying this since the beginning. That's what the legislators are there for. If it's a constitutional issue, that's what the courts are there for. I don't think any of us want to live in a society, and I certainly don't, where we have police officers individually deciding what laws they think are good enough to enforce and what ones aren't, and deciding which laws they think are constitutional and which ones they think aren't. That is the antithesis of the type of policing that we should want in this country. So it's a great question, and I don't have a good answer for it. Scrolling. Thanks, Melanie. And we got a lot of comments tonight. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll as quickly as I can. No, the screen's not frozen. I'm just reading as quickly as I can. Yes, a lot of people hate the Born to Ghetto term. We're all in that together. There was no curfew. If you remember when the stay-at-home order went into effect originally, they wanted people to not be out. I think it was after 8 p.m. But it was just like the mask thing. It was an ask. It wasn't something that was a law or was enforceable. However, yeah. So Kellyanne, I see your comment about the curfews. When I say there's no curfew, I mean there's no statewide curfew. There's absolutely a curfew in Barnegat for kids under the age of 18, and any of the township municipal properties like the dock and the bathing beach are closed at night. So if somebody was asked to leave the dock at 10:30 at night, that's because the dock's closed at 10:30 at night by ordinance. That's not a police department rule. That's a township rule. Can kids play catch in the park? Good question, Kirsten. Yeah, they are allowing you to play catch, kick the soccer ball around. Where the state has drawn the line, apparently, is it can't be organized. It can't be a sports team. Can't be a club sport. Can't be the local recreation sport. Again, it creates, like a lot of these other issues you're seeing, these strange dichotomies. I think I talked about it last week. A father can take his daughter down to Water Street and hit a baseball around, hit a softball around. But if the same father is a coach and wants to go down and coach a kid who's not his child, that's not allowed because that's considered organized. I know I look like Dr. Evil when I do the fingers, quote fingers. So that's just the rule. Curfew is moved back to 10, I think. I'll double check it though, Kellyanne. Yeah, Kellyanne, I'll give you the exact times on the dock and beach. I have to pull the ordinance. I don't know them off the top of my head. It's been a long, long time since I was out there in that capacity. There's always a joke: if you want the right answer, don't ask a chief. All right. No, Kellyanne, not a new rule. That's been on the books for a long time. The Bay Beach is open, Anna. Just supposed to social distance there, 6 feet away from parties that are not in your household or immediate household members. So, yeah, no contact sports, Michelle, but the family members can throw a ball around, kick the soccer ball around. That's allowed. And again, we're, like I talked about, we're here in the same room as you are, that that's going to be that some of those restrictions are going to be lifted. Again, looking at the outdoor dining restrictions being lifted. We're just waiting for word from the state. So again, we'll all probably hear that at the same time. All right. I'm on the old legacy version of this because Facebook isn't supporting Chromebooks for live, so I can only scroll back for questions so far because they disappear on me. So if I missed anybody's questions, apologize for that. And as usual, I'll scroll through these later tonight or tomorrow and make sure I answer anything I missed, which I usually do. We're just about that same 35-minute mark we are every week. All right, if nobody has any other questions, as always, great questions, great attendance. Appreciate everybody's time and a great job everybody's doing as a community to keep us safe while this is going on. We talked about maybe rolling these back to not doing them every week. You can let me know your feelings in the comments on that. We may pull these back to once every other week, once a month, as kind of the info is getting less and less here as we kind of have planed out with this pandemic for now. So I'll kind of react to the town on that, how you want to do that going forward. So we'll review this stuff. I'll either see you next week or in a couple of weeks. Everybody stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.